So I'll call the meeting back to order. We had started at 1:30 with a closed session. The three items that we discussed in closed session, the first was a personnel matter regarding department structure and staffing. The second was again a personnel matter regarding commemorative naming, and the third also a personal matter. This was an HR matter. So from the first item, the department structure and staffing, we have a recommendation coming out of that discussion. The recommendation that council fund the full-time position of deputy chief commencing on July 1st, 2020, and that council adopt the fire department organizational chart as specified in bylaw 19-59. So I'm looking for a mover and seconder for this recommendation.
Councillor Delegated, move.
So I heard Councillor Delegated. Is there a seconder?
Councillor Maiden.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Maiden. All then in favor, actually I should say, is there any further discussion on this recommendation? I'll just pause for a moment if anyone has any further discussion. Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor, starting with Councillor Delegated, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
No.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. So the recommendation passes. The second item was the commemorative naming. Council was provided an update in camera. And the third item, HR matter, council again was provided an update in camera. And with that, we're moving along to the disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. So if there's a matter that we're discussing today that you have a pecuniary interest in, please make that statement either at this time or when the matter arrives on our agenda. I'm looking for a mover and seconder for approval of the agenda.
Also approved.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes.
Councillor Maiden, second.
That was Councillor Maiden, I think. Okay, so we have a mover and seconder for the approval of the agenda. All then in favor, beginning with Councillor Delegated, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard? Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. The agenda is approved. And we have the approval of the minutes. These are our council minutes from June 2nd, found on pages 6 to 11 of your agenda package. I'm looking for a mover and seconder to approve the minutes.
Holmes will approve.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. And a seconder?
Councillor Maiden.
Thank you, Councillor Maiden. Any discussion from the minutes? Hearing none, all then in favor of approving the minutes, beginning with Councillor Delegated, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson? Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. And with that, we will go to our first and only delegation of the afternoon. And I welcome Mr. Howard Allan to join us to discuss the 2019 audited financial statements. So Mr. Allan, welcome to our e-meeting here this afternoon. Let's see if we still have Mr. Allan with us here.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Your worship, can you hear me?
It's a little quiet, but I think we can. I think we can hear you.
Okay, I had trouble sort of unmuting myself there for some reason.
Well, we can hear you now. I think it's okay.
Okay, so I've tried to move the mic a little bit closer. So I think what I've provided for you today is you do have sort of 5 sheets of paper, starting with the consolidated statement of operations that I just wanted to have a look at. And these are consolidated statements, so I just wanted to remind council that, thank you, Ken. I just wanted to remind council that these statements include not only the municipality itself, but it also includes our pro rata share of the Ottawa River Power Corporation and its associated company. And it also includes the entire operations of the Mississippi River Power Corporation. It also includes our local boards, the two boards being the BIA and the Public Library Board. Sorry, the daycare center. It includes the daycare center. So all these operations are consolidated, and as you know, one of the roles of the auditor is to ensure that the statements are free of material misstatements. And so we go through a series of tests, we look at evidence, we look at the internal controls, and we concluded this year that the financial statements as we see them are free of material misstatements. So I want to say that overall the audit went well. This year was a bit different, as you can appreciate, with the COVID protocol, but overall things for the audit this year did go well. I think when you look at the statement of operations that's in front of you, you'll notice that our revenues are higher than budget, even when you take into account the fact that we are including the Ottawa River Power, the Ottawa River Energy Solutions, and the Mississippi River Power Corporation. They total about $725,000 or so, but even then, our revenues were better than what we anticipated, and our expenses were actually a little bit lower. So the net result is that we are showing a surplus from operations. Now, the lion's share of that surplus is because we've consolidated the operations of the companies we own a part of. But we did anticipate this year, we did budget for a deficit, and that might look a little bit strange looking for a deficit from operations, but that takes into account the fact that we budgeted about $3.5 million for depreciation, which is not a cash expenditure. When you look at the other revenues at the bottom of the page, these really relate to our capital projects. Some of them that we anticipated, we didn't get some of our infrastructure funding this year because our projects didn't get going. But overall, I think, although they appear to be lower than what budgeted, they make sense in terms of the projects that we did undertake this year. So overall, I think when you look at the operations, one of the things we look to is, was council respective, were they paying respect to the budget they had set? Did they follow the budget through the year? And I think the answer to that obviously is yes, and I think the results for this year show that. When you go to the next page, which really shows our changes in net debt, you'll notice that our net debt for the year actually, at the beginning of the year was about 5.2 million. It ended up being 4.3 million. So we're moving in the right direction in terms of our net debt. What this takes into account, it takes into account all of our assets, all of our financial assets, and all of our financial liabilities, including long-term debt. And I believe, the consolidated debt for the municipalities in the range of about 19 million. So this is good. You can see that if we excluded our long-term debt, we'd be in a positive working capital position, which we need, of course, for our capital projects and our long-term plan. Keeping this number in mind, our net debt number, if you go to the next sheet, which is really our balance sheet of the statement of changes in financial position, or our statement of financial position, you'll notice that partway through the statement, you'll see the net debt figure of 4.3 million. So again, when you look at our numbers, they are moving in the right direction. Our total financial assets, you'll see about 24, close to 25 million, doesn't include the assets of our corporations that we do have an interest in. So for example, the Ottawa River Power Corporation, our share of the assets of that company at their cost would be about 2.3 million. River Energy Solutions, not so much, but about 322,000. And then our investment in Mississippi River Power Corporation, we do own 100% of that corporation, is 4.4 million, is what its net worth as. So they are valuable assets to the municipality. At the bottom of this page, you'll notice that we have intangible capital assets, about 75 million. So those are monies that we paid out at historical costs. We've depreciated them over time, but you'll notice that we end up with a municipal equity position of about 73 million, taking into account our net debt. So really, when you look at our net debt in terms of our total asset, overall, I think it is reasonably modest. And I know the municipality has had a lot of infrastructure projects, and that's created debt, but hopefully we'll now be in a position to pay it off over time. The last two pages I wanted to look at were really just statements showing a 5-year review, showing a trend. And I think that overall you can see that our taxable assessment, as we know, it is going up. It is on hold for next year due to the COVID protocol, but it will go up slightly for any new builds or any new assessment that comes online, but we won't be revaluing the properties for 2021. In terms of our tax rates, I think I've told you before that I think a good comparison for Mississippi Mills is North Grenville. It's kind of a rural-urban mix, much like you are. And our rates of taxation are very competitive. One of the things you do have to consider is what the average assessment is per household. But overall, you know, our tax rates, and I think our taxes per household are competitive for municipalities of our size. Tax arrears continue to go down, and I think that's a tribute to Rhonda and her staff. I know that you have put in some new rules for the COVID situation, and I expect this number might increase. But overall, prior to this, you can see that we were steadily decreasing. And generally speaking, I mean, we think you're in a low-risk position if, in fact, your arrears are less than 10%. So to have a number, I think this is one of the lowest numbers that we would see, and we do over 20 municipalities, and this is a very low number. So I think the Treasury staff are to be congratulated on their hard work in this area. Going down to the bottom of the page, I mean, looking at our net financial assets compared to, or our net debt compared to our operating revenues, we're kind of right at the low risk level. You can see we're minus 19.47%, and you're deemed to be in a low risk area if you're at minus 20%. So we're very, very close to that. In terms as a percentage of taxation, if you're in a negative position, if you have a net debt position, that's 59% of taxation. You're deemed to be in a low-risk position. We're actually only at 24. So again, I think when you look at our trends, that overall we did bump up for some infrastructure work we did, but we are moving in the right direction for sure. Going to the next page and looking at our long-term debt. Again, our long-term debt charges this past year were about 1.8 million. According to the province, our annual limit based on the size of our municipality and our expenditures, our annual repayment limit would be about 4.4 million. That being said, you never want to fill up your credit card 100%, but we certainly have some room in that area. Our equity positions, our surplus and reserves, you can see, have gone up steadily for the past 5 years. And I know that you're working on a plan, and you have a plan that an asset management plan that you do have, where you can kind of monitor what your capital expenditures are and where the monies are going to come from. And I know that Rhonda looks at that plan, and when we do things outside the plan, then we have to borrow accordingly. I think the rest of the numbers, I mean, again, our reserves as a percentage of operating expenses, I mean, we look good. We're greater than 20%. Our asset consumption ratio, I mean, what this reflects is depreciation that we've taken on our assets over time. So if we look at their original cost and we look at how much depreciation we've taken about 35%. And of that amount that we've taken in depreciation, we've set aside around 20% in reserves. And I would say that when I look at other municipalities, the capital reserves as a percentage of depreciation runs in the 15 to 20% area. So we're at the high end of that range. Overall, I mean, I think the municipality is doing well from a financial perspective. I think that under the management team that you have there, and Rhonda obviously is very astute as an accountant and provides good information. But overall, I think it's great. And from an audit point of view, we found the records to be good and well done. And so I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that you might have. But overall, I think the 2019 audit went well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Allan. I will go to council for any questions that council members may have for Mr. Allan about the financial statements. And I'll start with Councillor Delegated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allan. I got a couple questions. I'm on page 15 of the agenda, top of the page, population and number of households. Population, I understand it's Stats Canada census, I believe. Is that why it's the same amount since 2016?
That is correct. They update it every 5 years. And we used to, or sometimes we used MPAC numbers, but we found them to be really unreliable. So we use MPAC for the number of households because that does seem to take into account building permits and actual units that are in the municipality. But population we have found all over the map, so we tend to use Stats Can numbers, but we generally ask the treasurer and maybe the CAO if they want to change those numbers. We don't mind. We just give them there to give us an indication of the size of their municipality.
Okay, thank you. And the other question, right under there, the number of households, MPAC, is that all dwelling types?
Yes, it is all dwelling types. So it includes not only single family houses, but it includes duplexes. And it doesn't, I don't know that it includes, it wouldn't include the actual apartments. They would be there as a building, but I don't think all those apartments are there.
Thank you very much. That's all, Mayor Lowry.
Okay. Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, I do have a couple of questions. Thank you, Howard. Always good to see you.
Good to see you too, Dennis.
On page 12, and I know Howard alluded to it, but the net revenues, it seems that we're almost doubled what we had budgeted versus what received. Is that just that we should tighten that up a bit, Howard, or no?
So the net revenue, well, I have to make sure that I'm on the same page as you. So the net revenue at the bottom, you're saying, is this where we have 870,000 and we budgeted a minus 2 million? Is that the one you're looking at?
Yes.
So I think, first of all, one of the things that we don't take into account is the net income that we earn from Ottawa River Power, Ottawa River Energy, and Mississippi River Power. So those totals about, 730 to 750,000. So really, when you take that into account, our net revenue is around, we're close to break even. We're going to be in the 140,000 range, and we actually budgeted to have a deficit. I think that's just because we generated more revenues this year than what we anticipated. If you look, I'm sure Rhonda has given you a breakdown, but if you look at the revenues themselves, there are revenues that are higher than we budgeted. User charges, for example, for sewer and water. Our residential taxation due to supplementaries was up a couple $100,000. And then if you look at our expenditures down below, we did spend less money, particularly in environmental services, by about $800,000. I think some of the projects and the engineering costs that we anticipated didn't get underway. We did spend less in recreation and cultural. So I think overall, it just is one of those years. I'm sure that Rhonda can give you a very precise reason why these numbers are different than what we budgeted. But I'm not sure it was necessarily a budget problem. I think you have to look at the fact that, our overall revenues are over 20 million. So we're within 10% of our budget originally, which I think is an acceptable variance.
Okay, thank you. How many questions am I permitted, Madam Chair?
As many as you answer, Councillor Ferguson.
Staying on the same page, Howard, at the very bottom, municipal equity, and I know you made reference to it, but at 73, how do we compare with our comparators? Is that, we have the luxury of hydro, obviously, but is that, I assume that's relatively good?
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the municipality. And as I mentioned before, I think you need to look at municipalities that are similar. In our area, there's not a lot of municipalities that would have the same rural-urban mix that we do, which is why I sort of look to North Grenville. I think our numbers compare favorably with them. But you'll notice that most of the townships in our area, like you look at Lanark County, we seem to have mostly towns and or townships. And our case in Mississippi Mills is that rural-urban mix, which I think has stood this municipality in good stead, because I think it's made our tax rates very competitive. And like you say, we do have a lot of municipal equity because we do have infrastructure in our communities, and Almont and Pakenham, that has increased this number somewhat.
Good, thank you. On page 15, and it's not the first time I guess I've asked this question over the years, but if you look at our commercial assessment, it has been going down progressively every year for the last 5 years, and now it's, I guess this time is down again, of course. So do you see any issue with that, or is that just reassessments that are not quite the same, or?
Yes, I think that you're right. As a percentage of our total assessment, it has gone down a little bit. The actual assessment dollars in the last 3 years have gone up a little bit. I think it's partially because maybe commercial properties, particularly those in our towns like Almont and Pakenham, maybe haven't been increasing like our residential properties have. On a percentage basis, I know, my daughter lives in Almont, and I know when they try to buy houses and that kind of thing, they tell me, prices are going up here. So I think it's a function of the fact that residential real estate has increased in value more quickly than commercial and industrial. But, because of the rates, if you look down below, the fact is that for our total municipal rate for commercial properties is 0.95. For municipal properties for a house, it's at 0.52. Industrial, our municipal rate is 1.33. So they're nice assessments to have for sure, commercial and industrial, because they do contribute more to taxes on a pro rata basis. But I think that overall, the percentage that you have is not unusual for small towns in Eastern Ontario. There are a few exceptions, like in maybe perhaps Smith Falls, where they have big plants that have come in. But I've noticed even in Perth, which always had a high commercial and industrial assessment, they have been declining over the past number of years.
Okay, thank you. On page 20, well, I guess it's 27, I think, where it's cash at the end of the year.
Yes?
Significant difference between 19 and 18. Is that unusual or no?
No, I wouldn't say that's unusual. I mean, it just happens that this year, like we budgeted, for example, to spend over $7 million in capital projects. We spent about $5.5. So, you know, there's $2 million right there. As we noted, we budgeted basically to have a $2 million deficit because of depreciation. It turned out we broke even. And you have to appreciate that we do budget for depreciation. And depreciation in total was about $3.5 million. And we need to budget for depreciation so we can put money into reserves to carry out our long-term capital plan. And so my sense is that this is not highly unusual, but I think it just reflects the year that we had, that some of our projects that we anticipated completing didn't get completed, and we did better in revenue, and we spent less money than what we anticipated. So it's all good.
Okay, just one last one, and it's in reference to Councillor Delegate's question, the number of households, and certainly on page 15, it works out to 142, but if we look at page 91, it's 164. So is that just the delay of impact picking up the actual real numbers or no?
You mean in terms of the population per household?
No, the number of households. As we'll see, that's if we subtract the number of households in 219, 5897 versus 5755, but then if we look over on page 91, it's the number of new dwelling units that works out to 164. So I guess, in conjunction with his question, should those numbers jive, or is just that MPAC is kind of slower getting the real numbers out?
Well, it might be good to maybe chat with Rhonda about that, but I think one of the issues is, yes, it does take a while for MPAC to catch up. And so when they do catch up now, they will go back and try to collect taxes for previous years if they've missed one or if they've been behind. But there's no question impact, and I think they're really going to be behind this year in terms of catching up in terms of household. But that's what I would think it is. I think you're correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Howard, always good talking to you.
Thank you.
If I could just jump in, page 91 that you're referring to, Councillor Ferguson, actually is another report that's coming up. So Mr. Allan probably wasn't privy to that that page and that information. So just Mr. Allan, it is a report from our building division, so you may not have seen that.
Yeah. No, I had not. No.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving to Councillor Gerard. Any questions for Mr. Allan?
No, thank you. They've been asked.
Okay, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. Yes, I do have one question. It's on page 16, the 5-year financial review. I noticed that the long-term debt per household is $3,284, which is an increase of about $350 over last year. How does that debt per household compare to other municipalities, Mr. Allan?
Well, I think compared to townships, and, you know, some of the rural municipalities, that number would be very high. Compared to other urban centers, it really depends what stage they're at in terms of improving their infrastructure. You'll notice at the bottom of that same section that we're collecting of our total charges for the year, which are close to 2 million, about 1.8 million. Approximately 500,000 comes from users, which is really the water and sewer would be the largest contributor to that. And then tax supported, we would get 1.3 million. I would say the amount of 3,200 per household is at the high end of the range. I mean, our total debt is close to 20 million at the end of the year, 19,300,000. But we have spent a lot of money in upgrading the community and providing more infrastructure for new housing. And so I think you're going to find that our growth, as time goes on and we get our numbers updated for housing, that number is going to be diminished and we're going to be very competitive once again. But right now, I'd say we're at the high end of the range for communities of our size.
So I guess just to clarify then, you're anticipating perhaps next year that would be less?
Yeah, the other reason why it's gone up this year is because we did acquire some new debt this year. You'll notice our debt last year was about 16.8 million. This year it's 19.3. So we did finance some of our capital this year. It depends whether or not we plan to borrow more money next year. But if we don't borrow more money, that number will certainly go down.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councillor Maiden.
I'm just wondering if Mr. Allan could comment on the relationship of development charges and planning for those. Are they reflected in here anywhere? Because we're reviewing them and we are planning new things that may require additional debt. And I'm wondering how the development charge collection is reflected here, or is it reflected specifically?
I don't know if you have a full copy there of the financial statements. Yeah. But if you have a full copy on the statements, I'm looking at my numbers. And at the bottom of the page, it would be page 16. It's in note 5 to the financial statements. And it shows you, Ken's bringing it up on the screen here. If you go to right there, deferred revenue, you'll see the first one is development charges. And development charges, we started off this year with 2 million. We got contributions this year of 1.9 million from developers. Of course, we earned interest. And of that amount of money that we collected this year, we transferred almost 1.2 million to capital projects. So at the end of the year, we still have 2.7 million. This does not show up as revenue when we collect it. We only show it as revenue when we transfer it to use it. It goes into what we call deferred revenue. So it is revenue, but it's deferred in terms of us showing it until we bring it into revenue. So this year, you brought in close to 1.2 million. And developers are certainly seem to be paying the development charges without any issue.
I had a question about on page, I think it's 12, contributed assets of, this was in 2018 of 696,493. I'm just wondering what that's specific to. It's under other.
Yeah, so what I think that was, now I don't, Rhonda's not on the line, is she? Is Rhonda with us today? No, eh?
Yes, I'm here.
Rhonda, last year that 696 of contributed assets, was that for a subdivision that we took over and that was their share?
Yes, it was.
Right. So sometimes there's a subdivision that's built by developer, then we go in and take it over. So when we take it over, they contribute the monies that they spend on the infrastructure. And that's what that $696,000 is.
Okay, thanks very much.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli, any comments or questions for Mr. Allan?
Yeah, just an observation. First, Howard, how are you?
I'm good, Rick. How are you?
I'm great. Look at a good factual report, about as cut to the chase as you can get for a financial statement. I think it shows some good, clear numbers and where we're at and where we're heading. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, if there's not any other comments, I thank you very much, Mr. Allan, for your time and for preparing these statements. And I would thank our staff as well, who are clearly leading us well in this area. So thank you very much, Mr. Allan.
Thank you. And thank Rhonda and Ken and staff for their fine work.
Absolutely. Thank you for that comment.
Okay, have a great day.
You as well. Thank you so much. So I'm looking for a mover and seconder for the recommendation in the agenda. The recommendation is that the deputation by Howard Allan from Allan Partners Chartered Accountants regarding the 2019 audited financial statements be received, and that the council accept and approve the 2019 audited financial statements for the corporation of the Municipality of Mississippi Mills. So mover and seconder for that recommendation.
Move, Ferguson.
So Councillor Ferguson moved and Deputy Mayor Manelli seconded?
Yes.
Okay. And if there's no further discussion, I will go to the vote. Okay, beginning with Councillor Delegated, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you, folks. So this brings us to our first report, which is under building and planning. This is the building permit fee report for 2019. This is a holdover from our March 17th meeting that had been postponed. So I welcome our Chief Building Officer, Mr. Dan Prest, for any comments on this report before we go to council. We have Mr. Prest on our line still.
Can you hear me?
There he is. Yes, we can hear you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Just trying to learn all the little symbols.
So is there anything you wish to highlight in the report from 2019, Mr. Prest?
Yes. This was written pre-COVID. So some of the things that we stated in here, actually we've had to actually implement in regards to the electronically trying to get people through the system. I'm also noticing between the audit report and some of our building stats, as Mr. Allan was talking about, they don't always match because of the way the data is collected in our CGIS system, and then the comparable with MPAC, and then comparable with StatsCan. So I found that was very interesting in listening to this report. So does anyone have any specifics?
Sure, I can go through the list of council members if there's any comments or questions for Mr. Prest. Beginning with Councillor Ferguson.
No, thank you, but other than the comment in reference to the numbers don't always jive, and I appreciate that, the comment on that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Gerard.
Comment, thanks.
Councillor Holmes.
No comment, thank you.
Councillor Maiden.
I have a question about the permit fees, because we changed them, and some of them recommended by the building department were kind of a significant change from previous years, and I think probably for the better, but I'm just wondering if Mr. Press could give council some feedback on if there's been any issues. Did he think anything needed to be adjusted one way or the other?
Well, currently I'm working and doing some research in regards to the permit fees. And as Councillor mentioned, we did make recommendations and actually lowering some of the smaller project fees to encourage the people to actually come and get them so that we can assist them. And the higher end ones, of course, we maintained. The building, the 124, requires us, as you know, to meet our costs and to put some away in the piggy bank. Traditionally, most municipalities try to put about 3 years budget away so that they can smooth out those ups and downs. As you can see, the last couple of years we've been quite successful tracking people. But generally speaking, I should have a report in the fall that we're going to cover a lot more about the permit fees, so I can update council on that.
Okay, thank you. I was just kind of wondering if you'd had any feedback about the change in fees from the public mostly.
Oh heavens, no. Again, our system is a set system, and we try to deal with it on how many permit inspections we need to do. So whether a deck is 200 square feet or 2,000 square feet, the same price for us because we have the same amount of inspections to do.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Manelli.
No comment. I think it's a fairly good report.
Okay. And Councillor Delegated?
Good report, thanks, and I have no comments.
All right. So seeing that there's no more discussion, I'm looking for a mover and seconder for the recommendation that council receive the 2019 building permit fee report for information.
Council move.
I'll second Maiden.
Was it Councillor Holmes that moved?
Yes.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Holmes and seconded by Councillor Maiden. All done in favor, beginning with Councillor Delegated, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. And this takes us to our second report. This is a potential amendment to the animal control bylaw to permit hens in defined settlement areas. And I will go to our Director of Planning, Ms. Nikki Dwyer, for some opening statements about this report.
Thank you, Mayor Lowry. Like the report says, the reason this report is being tabled at this time for discussion is in response to inquiries that staff have had, an increased number of inquiries that staff have had, rather, over the spring of 2020 regarding the keeping of chickens in urban areas and subdivisions. When I say that there's been an increase, I would say in the last 90 days, there's probably been 12 to 15 inquiries from the general public around regulations associated with the keeping of chickens and requests to do so. They've ranged from the subdivision of Whitetail Ridge to Almont to some of the estate lot subdivisions in Ramsey, and parts of the village of Pakenham. So they are very much all over. I'll be honest, initially staff were not terribly excited by this idea, if I'm frank with you, and perhaps that's my city bias. But I did try and take a pretty unbiased look at policies that have been adopted by municipalities in the area. And notably, what I did conclude was that most municipalities walked in with the same concerns that I do at this point around animal welfare, wandering chickens, noise disturbances, what to do with manure, things like that. The responses that I was finding, particularly following the conclusion of pilot projects, was that a lot of these concerns never materialized. And ultimately, the municipalities decided to amend their animal control bylaws permanently to allow for the keeping of hens. There is definitely a distinction between keeping hens and keeping other sorts of gilliforms, and certainly there's a prohibition uniformly across the municipality for, or rather the province, for keeping of roosters in urban areas. So what the purpose of the staff report is is to generate discussion by council and seek direction on how you would like the municipality to handle requests for urban chickens. Right now they are not permitted. The only place you can have a chicken in the municipality in accordance with the animal control bylaw is in the rural or agricultural areas. If you were going to permit them in settlement areas, I have drafted a proposed amendment that you may want to consider to allow for a framework, and perhaps if the CAO could scroll down to those provisions. Yep, so maybe keep going. So we added some new definitions, but the bulk of the amendment is highlighted in red. The black context, keep going please, is the existing bylaw.
Do you have a page number?
It is page 108. There you go. So the recommendation, to be consistent with other municipalities, is that we would keep no more than 4 hens, absolute max, that they would be permitted in single detached, semi-detached, and townhome dwellings where the property owner lives, so you couldn't have them on a rental property. Hens are for egg production only and are not intended to be raised for meat. Certainly concerns associated with homeowners slaughtering their own chickens would be something that we would not want to see in the middle of a subdivision. Hens are kept for personal use only, and the owner shall not offer the sale or gift of part of the hen egg or manure. There are requirements through the province for the grading of eggs if you are going to sell or pass the eggs along to a third party, so that would not be permitted through the keeping of hens. Hens have to be kept in a defined house and fully fenced area so that they cannot roam freely and that they are safe and secure from other urban wildlife that may see them as dinner. Also, the coops have to comply with the accessory structure provisions of the zoning bylaw, and there are some additional provisions associated with how to handle chicken waste and in more specifically the disposal of deceased hens. Now, I understand from conversations with Councillor Holmes that it is actually challenging to try and find a licensed veterinarian to take deceased chicken livestock. So it may be something that council wants to consider more fulsomely before we agree to adopt the policy, if this is something that council even wants to do. And with that, I'd take questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dwyer. I'll go to council for any comments or questions on the report, beginning with Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, through the chair. I have 2 questions, actually. One, item K, which refers to hens, meaning domesticated female chicken, at least 4 months old. I'm not exactly sure why 4 months is specified in that.
Thank you for the question. What I noticed in the other bylaws that I was referring to as a reference from other municipalities was that they all referred to a minimum age of 4 months. And I believe, although I am not certain, as I am not a farmer, that it has to do with the level of care that the chicken needs at that time of their life. I'm not quite sure how long you have to keep them under heating lamps. But my understanding is that they're a little bit more fragile under 4 months. And so the recommendation is that post 4 months, they are more stable and can be housed in a coop with other chickens.
So we're saying that they have to be 4 months old to be allowed to be in town?
At least 4 months old, Councillor.
Okay, when you order chickens, you get them as day olds. So a person who acquires chickens possibly is not going to be able to buy them at 4 months old. So I'm not exactly sure why we're specifying 4 months.
Thank you. Like I said, it was wording from other policies that other municipalities have adopted. If council would like to amend it to remove the reference, then we can do so.
Okay, I question that one. I also question for 4 hens. Each chicken may lay an egg a day. I believe when I looked into other municipalities, the average was 6. I'm just questioning why we've gone to 4.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say, and as the report does say, most municipalities ranged within 4 to 6 hens. Certainly what I did find from OMAFRA's website was a recommendation for 4. However, again, if council wishes to increase it to 6, then we can do so.
Any further questions or comments, Councillor Gerard?
I was just going through, I believe those are the only 2 that caught my mind. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. So through the chair to our director, fundamentally, I agree with people having chickens. Not so sure that I agree with them having them in town without a more fulsome discussion with everyone. I'm not sure if I live next door on a small lot, I'd want 4 chickens. So I'm going to recommend that we defer this until we can meet as a committee of the whole and have a better discussion. I also don't. I know disposal is going to be a problem. If you call a dead meat disposal company, they're not coming under $100. And do you want a truck, with a bunch of dead cows with their feet stuck up driving through a residential area to pick up a chicken, which I don't think they're going to do. Veterinarians, my veterinarian, certainly said she would not be accepting dead chickens. She has no way of disposing of them either. So I think we have to think this out a little bit more clearly before we go any further. Thank you.
Councillor Maiden?
I personally have a history with chickens and kind of like them, but in the town of Almont, it might be, there's a good neighbor aspect to this that I think I would like to see. I agree with Councillor Holmes to defer the fulsome discussion, but in the meantime, I would like the municipality to solicit views from particularly residents in urban areas about this, because there's concerns about, even the feed, being spilled on the ground or whatever, attracting, mice and other vermin, that sort of thing. So I would agree with Councillor Holmes, but maybe to add that, right away we solicit people's views on this. And I'm thinking of some of the smaller lot sizes with, townhomes and so forth. That might be a little bit, because chickens do have a bit of a smell, even if they are regularly cleaned. It might bother people if they're too close. You might want to have a minimum lot size for that type of thing. That's all I have to say.
Hey, Deputy Mayor Manelli.
I'm not a farmer either, but I do know something about chickens. And I'd love to put a motion to receive this for information. And I'd like to move it.
So Deputy Mayor Manelli, I'll come back to you for that. I do want to give everyone a chance to ask their questions or comments. But if I put that motion on the floor, then we won't be able to have the rest of council ask their questions or give comments. But I'll come back to you once we've gone through the full list, if that's all right.
All right, I thought it was last again.
You're halfway this time. I'll come back to you. Councillor Delegated.
I'm also in favor of deferring this to the committee of the whole in August or whenever we get there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
To address Councillor Gerard's comments, yes, day-olds are the preferred way to buy them normally, and being an old chicken farmer, I've been involved for a long time, but there's also ready-lays that are very popular, so that clarifies that 4-month time or the time frame they start to lay. But as a comment, the suppliers cannot keep up with the demand for chickens. Certainly they've back ordered a lot of chickens now, and obviously the interest in chickens has peaked with COVID, that everyone all of a sudden is interested in chickens and eggs and everything else that kind of is going to supply the food chain, I guess. But they're not as simple as they're made out to be, maybe as far as maintaining and looking after. And the one question I do have is under, and its definition found on page 104, section 1F. And a coop, obviously it would be weatherproofed, but I can tell you, come minus 25 and 40 below, unless it's insulated, the chickens aren't going to be very productive. In fact, they may be frozen stiff in the mornings for anyone that's going to go out and look at a chicken. So that may be something to consider.
Thank you for your comments. So we'll go back to Deputy Mayor Manelli. You had a motion you wanted to put on the floor?
Yeah, I'd just like to receive this for information, and I don't think town's the right place to have it, and if I can get a seconder, I appreciate it.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Holmes?
Good.
So just seeking some clarity from the clerk. I did hear, as we were receiving comments from council, that a number of council members wanted to discuss this once we're back into the committee of the whole. There were a couple of councillors who also indicated they'd like to have public comment on this. If we receive it for information, is that precluding either of those two options?
I would recommend that you provide some clarity on what you want staff to do, because usually when we receive a report for information, it stops there. If you want it to come back to committee of the whole, or if you want to conduct some public consultation, I would recommend that you put a motion forward to do those, or an amendment to this motion so you add to it.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion or a moved motion to receive this as information. If we're wishing to add other pieces to this so that it is not essentially dead at this point, we would need to amend that motion. But first of all, we would need a seconder for Deputy Mayor Manelli's motion. I think it was Councillor Holmes had said that, yes? So we have a mover and seconder. So if there's someone who wishes to add that this comes back for discussion at committee of the whole level, and or if there's an amendment to receive public comment, we would need to put those forward at this point as well. So I'll just give a moment if there's anyone who wishes to put those amendments forward.
Councillor Delegated. So could I put forward that, as Deputy Mayor Manelli said, we receive it for information at this point, but that we discuss this further at a committee of the whole meeting in August, or when we get started that again. And I believe once we start the committee of the whole meetings, we'll have 2 weeks where public can make comments to us at that time before it comes back to council.
So we do have the motion on the floor already to receive this as information. So Councillor Delegated, do you wish to add an amendment that we will defer further discussion to a COW meeting in August? Okay, is there a seconder to that amendment?
Councillor Maiden, second.
There's no seconder to the amendment to have this discussion at the committee of the whole at a later date?
Councillor Maiden, second.
Okay, so we have a seconder to that. Any discussion to the amendment? So specifically that we'd be continuing a discussion at committee of the whole level in August. I'll just pause to see if there's anyone who has a comment on that amendment. Okay, hearing not, I will go through the list of councillors simply looking for support for the amendment, which is just the deferral to the committee of the whole for further discussion. Beginning with Councillor Dalgety, yes or no?
Lowry, can you please repeat what you just said?
Sure. So I'm asking members of council, the vote is regarding simply the amendment that you had put forward, Councillor Dalgety. So this is regarding continuing this discussion around having animal control bylaw include a proposed amendment for hens, so that we continue that conversation at the committee of the whole level sometime in August. So it's just that amendment to Deputy Mayor Manelli's motion.
Yes.
Okay. So Councillor Dalgety, that's yes in favor?
In favor.
Okay. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
So we have 5 for the amendment, and now the amended motion, which is to receive this for information and deferring further conversation until the committee of the whole meetings resume in August. Is there any further discussion regarding the amended motion? I'll just pause. Okay, hearing no further comments. All then in favor of the amended motion, beginning with Councillor Dalgety.
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yes.
Sorry, Mayor Lowry, you just have a mover and seconder for your amended motion. This is the clerk.
I had Councillor Dalgety and Councillor Holmes.
For the amended motion or the amendment?
For the amendment, does the mover and seconder of the original motion not stand?
No, you have to have new movers and seconders for your amended motion. Your original motion was Deputy Mayor Manelli and Councillor Holmes, and I'm not sure if Deputy Mayor Manelli would move this amended motion. You just need movers and seconders to amend a motion.
Deputy Mayor Manelli, do you wish to move the amended motion?
No, I don't.
Okay, is there another mover for the amended motion?
Councillor Maiden.
Thank you, Councillor Maiden. And a seconder for the amended motion?
Councillor Dalgety.
Thank you, Councillor Dalgety. Any further discussion on the amended motion? Okay, hearing not. All those in favor then of the amended motion, which is to receive this report for information and defer further discussion until the committee of the whole meetings resume in August. Beginning with Councillor Dalgety, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
No.
Okay, thank you. This takes us to our third report. So we're in Roads and Public Works. This is the access agreements for the mill workers staircase. You'll recall that we had agreements to put in place with various partners. This is found on pages 114 to 115. And I'll just go to Mr. Corey Smith, our Public Works Technologist, if there's any comments from Mr. Smith before I put this recommendation on the floor. Mr. Smith on the line?
Mayor Lowry, Mr. Smith's not on the line. I think this is a fairly straightforward report. Either myself or the acting director, Mr. Armstrong, can speak to it, but This basically is just looking at three agreements, one with Mississippi River Power Corporation, one with Lanark County, and this is for the access and construction. And then there's also an agreement with a private property owner for the use of the bridge. So this basically just ensures that we can actually cross lands and maintain, and also cross lands for the actual construction. These are fairly straightforward agreements that need to be in place in order for the construction of the Riverwalk, the mill worker stairs to proceed. Without these agreements, the work can't proceed.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Kelly. I'll just pause and see if there is any questions or comments from a member of council.
Councillor Maiden here. Under financial implications, it states no financial implications of entering into these agreements at this time. Does that mean that there might be down the road? Question.
I think you're still muted there, Mr. Kelly, if you're responding.
Yes, you're correct, Mayor Lowry. Through Mayor Lowry to Councillor Maiden, yes, the way these the agreements are written, it's simply for access during the construction stage. And, at this time, and when there's no penalties or anything of a substantial nature written into these agreements. At this time, we don't foresee any financial requirements that are created or necessitated by these agreements.
Thank you.
We don't have to pay for access. There's no rental agreements or anything like that. It's fairly straightforward.
Thank you.
Was there any other comments or questions from council? I'll just pause. Okay, hearing not, I'll look for a mover and seconder. The recommendation is that council authorize staff to enter into agreements with Lanark County and Mississippi River Power Corporation for the purposes of allowing construction and long-term access for the extension of the Riverwalk, including the mill worker staircase. And that council authorize staff to enter into an agreement with a private property owner to allow long-term access across the property owner's private bridge for the purposes of the extension of the Riverwalk. Looking for a mover and seconder for this recommendation.
I'll move. Deputy Mayor Manelli.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Manelli. Is there a seconder?
A second.
Ferguson.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. All then in favor, starting with Councillor Dalgany, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. Brings us to our next report. This is the spring observations for the 2020 Wild Parsnip Management Program. This is found on pages 116 to 122. And I understand Ms. Armstrong, the Environmental Compliance Coordinator, couldn't be with us today. So I will go to CAO Kelly for comments on this report.
Thank you, Mayor Lowry. And I guess just in overall quick summary, the summary on this report is basically what was presented in April is what has been observed in the field. And there's no changes, I think, of a substantial nature to report on. I think there may be one or two segments that have moved from very light to moderate, but for the sum of the field operations that took place, there's been no substantial change. So you recall that in April 16th, when we brought forward this report, what we agreed to do was to go out and do field observations. So we're actually going into the field, you're driving each segment of the road, and you're making an assessment about what level of infestation is there. Basically just trying to ensure that the observations from 2019 that were captured are still relevant in 2020, in May and June of 2020. You'll notice in the report that the assessment took place May 15th and 22nd, and that we are actually going out a second time to make sure that we got it right between June 8th and 22nd. So basically, since the spray program that took place in June of 2019, this is actually going to be our third time out doing field observations to to ensure that what we are spraying in July is actually there, it exists, and we are actually moving forward with the proper treatment on the proper section of road. So in follow-up, that's also noted in the report, there will be a fall report coming forward on the observations that will happen in August, I believe, is when we will send staff out again to have a look to see what the implications are of the spray program. So as I said, the summary here is the field observations for the spring validate the data that was in the GIS or GPS dashboard of 2019. I'll open it to questions. Mayor Lowry, I'll put it back to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Kelly. So I'll start with Councillor Holmes. Any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you for the report. I do have a couple questions. I've been communicating back and forth with Abby and also with Dave around. There was at least one road missed in the report. So they've assured me that it's going to be put into the current survey to make sure that it's not missed. But is there some way a supplementary report could be sent out so that any of those missed roads, so we're aware of them? Because if people are on them and had not responded because they didn't see their road, and then all of a sudden it pops up, they should have an opportunity to opt out if they wish. I'm a little bit concerned about that. And also those people who the first time, you know, it's almost the same thing. If the first time they've it looks like there's no parsnip, but it pops up the second time, are those people going to have an opportunity to, are they going to be notified so they can opt out if they wish? Or is it their responsibility to keep watching to see?
Through Mayor Lowry to Councillor Holmes, unsure why particular roads such as Hamilton Road were not in the report. That's one that jumps to mind. I don't know if it was simply an Excel spreadsheet error. If that road was not assessed, and it does need to be assessed, unsure of that issue. I think it was in the assessment piece. I think it's just not in the report, and it wasn't in the April 16th report either. So, it was missing in both. I think Director Armstrong is on the phone or on the line. If he could comment about whether if there's a number of roads that we need to respond back, or if it is just that one that we need to pick up on. Mr. Armstrong, are you there?
Yes, CAO Kelly, through you, Mayor Lowry. So we have received a couple of calls just about roads that our residents are reporting they're seeing growth of it. Hamilton was one that was related through Councillor Holmes, so I thank you for that, as well as Ramsey 12 on that first stretch after Old Almont Road. So we had just a quick field observation, which is essentially just a staff going out and assessing it and seeing what kind of stage it's in right now. Hamilton Road wasn't in the 2019 observations, so that's why it's not in our 2020 spreadsheet. As I said, with the second assessment this spring, it will help us sort of see sort of paint a clearer picture on exactly where we're seeing growth with it. Again, it's a fairly volatile plan. It's biennial, so when we went out in May, we were hardly seeing any growth in some of the areas, and it's a bit harder to spot before it flowers. We're just starting to see some light flowering now, and it's not even reached full color yet of that yellow. We're still seeing kind of tan, beige, so it is still a bit harder to pick up, but we are just sort of responding as per we get calls for them. Again, our second assessment will be done through next week, and hopefully it gives us an exact, precise picture of what we're looking at for July, spring.
So to answer, I think, Councillor Holmes' original question, is there going to be a supplementary report? It would probably be warranted for us to wait until the conclusion of those observations, so we have some data to report on those roads, and we could push out an update, specifically noting the roads that are in addition to both the April April 16th report and this report, so that people can readily identify that the road is in there and that what the observation was in May and June of 2020 for that segment of road. So we could put that on our website as an update and send a notice out to people that via the news feed that it is up on the web. There will be no notice to people directly on those roads of the change in the report, but basically that we would simply put it on our website and it would be up for public viewing.
Thank you.
So I would look for that report after June 22nd.
Councillor Maiden?
I'm just wondering when the spraying is scheduled to happen this year.
Councillor Maiden, was that when the spraying is scheduled to happen? Okay. Through you, Mayor Lowry, this spraying is scheduled for, I believe, the second week of July. Mr. Armstrong, I think second week of July or first week of July is when we have the contractor lined up for this.
Yes, CEO, through you, Mayor Lowry. Yes, we haven't got an exact date from the contractor yet. They're just sort of ramping up through the area, but it will happen mid-July. Once we have a confirmed date, we can certainly communicate that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Thank you very much.
Councillor Delegated?
Just a comment, really appreciate the effort going into this and the multiple assessments just to get this right. Much appreciated, thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
August 19 and the pre-spray, and it's kind of an interesting trend, I think. 15 out of the 72 actually show either from light at the time to a very light, which is a decrease I checked out, and 17 of them show an increase. So we're basically, I think, at the status quo, although the roads may change. So is there really any explanation for that, or is it just that we're seeing growth that we haven't seen before? And I realize that Abby's report addressed that, but I just wonder, is there something there? Because it's pretty close where there's a change up or change down.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I'll direct a portion of this to the acting director, Mr. Armstrong, but I mean, this is field observations as well, and it is affected by what people are seeing as those road patrols are taking place. Mr. Armstrong, I don't know if there's anything more definitive in terms of why we're seeing more on certain roads but less on certain others. Is it spring weather? Is it water related? Is it time of year?
Yes, you, Mayor Lowry, to Councillor Ferguson. So again, as I stated earlier, the plant is biennial. The original assessment, we went out in mid-May. Like I said, it was fairly young, what we were seeing, and now we're kind of getting calls and reports from our own staff out on the road and indicating that they are seeing growth where we saw possibly very late or none in some areas. So it's a bit hard to track. I think once we continue to sort of collect this data on it, it gives us a better and clearer picture on exactly what we're seeing happening out and what our program is actually accomplishing. I think the more time we put into this, the more info we're going to get back for it and be able to review it and see what's going to be our best next steps moving forward.
Yes, thank you. That's it's interesting because I know there was a slow growth this spring, and I guess that may reflect some of the variances in the roads. I wonder if that's correct.
Through you and Mayor Lowry, yes, Councillor Ferguson, that's correct. We typically, I think last year we saw it certainly more prominent in the May assessment in June. And like I said, right now we're just sort of starting to see it flower a bit right now. So we certainly did have a late start this spring. with any kind of growth with it. So that's certainly playing its role in our observations.
Good. Thanks very much.
And Councillor Gerard, any questions or comments?
Just only comment would be that I'm very happy that we're spending this much time actually reviewing and looking at our actual roads, and my compliments to the staff for that. That's all. Thank you.
So I just had one question myself. So one was regarding the timing of the spraying. So it's mid-July, which it's good to know those dates. And I just wanted to verify, because there has been some confusion among some residents who have received notification, like mail-outs, that they would be included in the spray program, but those mail-outs didn't occur this year. And I'm fine with the decision to not send those notifications out, but I am concerned that there's some residents who aren't aware that those notifications aren't coming and may make the incorrect assumption that I didn't get a notification, so I'm not going to have spraying occur on my road, just because they're used to the last couple of years of that being the process. So I wonder if there'll be any verification of the 2019 opt-out landowners and properties, just to be sure that there hasn't been a gap in understanding from some of those individuals, if there's any plan that way.
Mayor Lowry, we did. I think what you're asking is, did we have a plan to basically reach out to people who had opted out in 2019 and to verify? There was no plan to phone or email those individuals and to verify whether they were in or out in the 2020 program. I think there's been some discussion back and forth about why and why not mail-outs did not go out with regards to COVID and timing and things of that nature. But there was no plan from staff at this moment in time to go out. I'm not sure of the number of opt-outs that we've received in 2020, if it's comparable to the 2019 number, and if we would have a number of people that we would think would not be aware of the program after this has been going on for a couple of years. But Mr. Armstrong, I'm wondering if you'd have any insight into whether there would be a large number of people that we don't think we've reached at this moment in time, and whether we would be able to contact those 2019 opt-out individuals or property owners.
Through you, Mayor Lowry. To you, Mayor Lowry. If council wants us to proceed in that matter, we can certainly allot staff to do it. For numbers this year, we received upwards of around 80 agreements. I believe 2019 we were, I don't know if we were double that. I'm not 100% on the number. I wasn't here and I haven't looked that far back to concern myself with it at this point. Again, if that is something council wants us to do, we can certainly reallocate staff to do that. As CAO Kelly had indicated, we weren't, staff wasn't planning on going that route. We received, so we set the May 29th deadline. We've received 3 agreements after that deadline. They were all processed fine. We spoke directly with the residents about it. I have not received anything, I believe, since June 3rd or June 4th, I think was the last time I processed one. So certainly if council wishes for us to proceed in that direction, we can focus our efforts on that.
I certainly don't want to suggest anything that's would be onerous on staff. I am concerned that there may be individuals who have been missed in the short time that we did do our communication on the spraying, and it's concerning as well to know that there's half as many agreements that have come through. I don't know if that's a reflection of the number of roads that would be included, or if that's a reflection of the number of people that have been notified. And I'm not sure if there's anyone on council who has the concern as well. Perhaps an easier solution is just to put a secondary notification out Councillor Holmes had indicated that there is at least a road or maybe a couple roads that have been missing. Perhaps it's a communication that indicates that this is the map. If you're on the road, you need to communicate to us if you're wanting to opt out. Because I don't want to put something forward that's difficult for staff to be able to accomplish, but at the same time, I am concerned if there's residents who are just not aware that they're not going to get that mail out because we haven't communicated it as such this spring. So perhaps I'll just pause there. I can't put a motion on the floor of any recommendation this way, but I'll just pause and see if there's any member of council who has a similar concern or wishes to put something forward. I see Councillor Holmes waving.
Yeah, I share your concern. I think just because it seems that this has been a bit of a difficult year with our, reports. We needed to go back and look at our reports and whatnot. I would like to be very careful to make sure that we are not missing people. As you'd said, other years we did put that notice out. So, is there a way we can? Could it be a telephone call to those people? Is that easier than putting something out in writing? I just ask.
So I don't know if CEO Kelly or Mr. Armstrong might have a suggestion here of a way forward that would be the least difficult for staff, but would address that concern.
Okay, through you, Mayor Lowry, I think there's kind of two issues here. I think one, with regards to half as many agreements as previous years, I think we'll also have a large number of roads in this program that are not receiving any treatment at all versus previous years. There's roads that we have identified that there's going to be nothing happening, and that's a divergence, I think, from the plan that was presented even in February, which saw treatment on most roads. So we may have a number of people who are simply, they don't need to opt out because there's no treatment going to be affecting their particular road. With regards to phone calls, I think that's going to be a hit or miss component as well. I don't think that's going to be, I guess, the coverage that you're looking for, because as we do make the phone calls, whether we actually make contact or not, whether we can verify that somebody has been spoken with or not. It may be something where we simply have to put something in the mail and blanket the community, or if we assume that putting something in a newspaper, which has been done before, or we put something on our website. Is it 100 plus phone calls that we have to make is the question, or is it more?
Go ahead, Councillor Holmes.
So I guess my response would be, if I saw a report that said my road isn't going to be touched this year, but then we're going back and doing another check and, oh gosh, there is some there, and we're going to, spot spray or whatever. I'm not sure if I'd be looking, once I heard that, oh gee, my road's fine, I'm not sure if I'd be looking in newspaper or anywhere else to see if there's been a change of conditions, So I guess I go back to, certainly don't want to put extra work on the staff, and I do appreciate all the work that's been put into, getting this right and doing the extra on the ground checks and whatnot. But I go back to what is going to work for the residents also, and is it enough to put it in the newspaper and put it on our website? Some people, don't have internet access. I don't know. I guess mine's better and bigger than mine could maybe give us some advice here.
Well, what I was suggesting is it's just as easy to put something in the mail. A notice out.
So could it be a cross-reference? Is there any way to cross-reference people who opted out last year or adopted a road last year and didn't this year? What are those the ones? Would it be easier if we just contacted those people if there was a cross-reference, or would that maybe disadvantage some people?
Through you, Mayor Lowry. So I believe we would have accurate records for who we had with opt-out agreements in 2019. Dependent on who's the owner and title. So it's in some cases where it's a rental property, we're looking at sending a letter to somebody outside of the municipality, possibly another part of the province or another part of the country, and maybe not actually getting that that straightforward answer from the person who's going to be affected by it. Like I said before, at the end of the day, whatever council wishes to direct us, we'll focus our efforts on it. We can certainly put it out on our website in the newspaper. As CAO Kelly spoke to earlier, I don't think making those telephone calls is going to be as prudent as maybe another option.
Are there other comments from other members of council on this? I just want to make sure I haven't missed anyone.
Well, if there's significant concerns in relation to that, and I agree that telephone calling is probably not the way to go, our most efficient way to go. Maybe we should consider again some radio ads. They're not going to break the bank, and it may accomplish what we're looking for.
Can I suggest that we leave this with staff to determine what might be the most effective way to communicate with the residents who, as Councillor Holmes had indicated, may assume that they are not being included, either because the road wasn't on the map originally or because they have received communication directly to their home other years. And if we leave this to staff to identify some ways to ensure those residents are communicated with, I don't know if it's something that we're going to solve right now on this call, but I think we probably trust the staff to ensure that proper communication is put in place, whether it's mail outs or radio ads or whatever have you. And perhaps keeping in mind that if next year we're not doing mail outs, that in our communication regarding the program, we do indicate that mail outs are going to be part of the communication strategy for the 2021 program. I might look to the clerk to see if you have something captured there in terms of a motion that might encapsulate some of the discussion that we've been having here.
So a motion that I drafted states the following: that council directs staff to communicate directly with residents who previously opted out and whose roads are now scheduled to be treated as part of the 2020 Wild Parsnip Management Program.
Is there a mover and seconder for that recommendation?
Move.
So Councillor Holmes has moved. Is there a seconder?
Councillor Maiden.
Thank you, Councillor Maiden. Any further discussion on this motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the vote, beginning with Councillor Delegated. Yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes? Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate staff, the extra work you've been putting into this file, so thank you for that. So moving on to Finance and Administration, we have the budget impacts of excluded expenses. This is per Ontario Regulation 284-09. This is a regulatory reporting piece. So this is found on pages 123 to 126. And I believe we have our treasurer, Rhonda Whitmarsh, on the line with us.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Anything you'd like to speak to on this report?
Just very quickly. So as you mentioned, the report is a requirement under Ontario Regulation 28409, and it's restating the 2020 cash budget from the cash basis to the accrual basis of accounting, considering amortization, post-employment expenses, and solid waste landfill and post-closure expenses. The municipality does not have post-closure or post-employment expenses, and the landfill closure costs are already included in the budget, which just leaves consideration of amortization in the restatement. So if you turn to page 126 of the agenda, the 2020 cash budget has been restated to show a surplus on the accrual basis of just over 1.3 million. And I'll just quickly go through each of the things that have been adjusted. So capital assets have been added back. They're capitalized and depreciated over time and are not considered an expense. I've added back principal paid on debt. Again, not considered an expense under accrual accounting, but a reduction in a liability. I've also added back transfers to reserves. Again, not considered an expense, but an increase in equity. And then I have taken off transfers from reserves, not considered revenue under accrual accounting, but a decrease in equity. I've added back proceeds from debt. Again, not revenue, but an increase in a liability. And then I have accounted for amortization under accrual accounting. So that's how we arrived at the surplus of 1.3 million. So I'm just recommending that council approve the report as presented.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Whitmarsh. I'll just pause and see if there is any comments or questions from a member of council before putting the recommendation on the floor. So feel free to ask a question if you have so. Okay, hearing none, I will look for a mover and seconder then for the recommendation that council accept the report prepared by the treasurer regarding excluded expenses as required by the Municipal Act 2001, Ontario Regulation 284-09. So mover and seconder for that.
Delegated Ferguson.
Thank you, Councillor Delegated. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. All in favor of the recommendation, beginning with Councillor Delegated, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. And our next item is the 2021 budget schedule and process. There's a recommended change in our process here from our treasurer. This is found on pages 127 to 131. And I will turn back to you, Ms. Whitmarsh, for some comments on this this new schedule and process.
Thank you, Mayor Lowry. So in the past, the budget was presented typically in October. The entire process could extend into the following year, depending on the number of meetings that were required, including the presentation to the public of the almost finalized document. This would often then push the approval of the final budget into the new year, causing delays in the release of tenders. The traditional process relied on the public meeting as the only form of public engagement and did not usually include education pieces to residents other than the budget document. On page 129 of the report, maintaining this process was considered as option 1, and the dates to do so are noted in the table. So it is hoped that the 2021 budget process could be modified to start earlier with the first presentation to council in September 2020 rather than October. And it would include weekly education pieces to residents, public engagement in the form of a survey, and a review at the same time by the Finance and Policy Committee with the target approval date of December 2020. Option 2, including the proposed timelines and dates, can be found on page 129 to 130 of the report. This is the preferred option as it provides council with input from the public during the process, provides improved communication, and a December approval date means that tenders can be released early in the new year. So that I am recommending council approve option 2 as the 2021 budget process and schedule.
Thank you very much, Ms. Whitmarsh. I'll go to council for any questions or comments on this report, starting with Councillor Maiden.
I really like this report. Compliments to the treasurer. I think it's encapsulated a lot of what we've been asking for the last year or so. I think that would work every year, except maybe in an election year when you have a bit of a kind of a lame duck council coming in, I guess in October, but looks good to me.
Deputy Mayor Manelli.
I like the day meetings for the budget. I think that works better than squeezing them in as a council meeting. So I'm happy with the timeline and the schedule. Thank you.
Councillor Delegated.
I'm happy with this as well, and thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
I'm happy. I just hope that we're in that position by September to be able to have figures available. I noticed where some municipalities have already delayed their budgeting, so I hope that we're back to some degree of normal prior to proceeding.
Councillor Gerard.
I was actually going to say the same thing that Councillor Ferguson did. I hope that this works. It looks good, but I think we have to see what happens with regards to regulations.
And Councillor Holmes.
Well, thank you. I like this new format, and I guess I'm going to think positively that come September we'll be able to follow it.
So I'm looking for a mover and seconder for the recommendation from the report, and that is that council approve option 2, enhanced community engagement, a September target start date and a December target approval date as the 2021 budget schedule and process. Mover and seconder for that recommendation.
Councillor Maiden move.
Thank you, Councillor Maiden.
Ferguson.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. All then in favor, starting with Councillor Delegated, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard? Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. We have a new budget process and schedule. So this brings us to item number 7. This is a report from our clerk, Ms. Jean Harfield, and it's regarding returning to in-person council meetings and live streaming. So I'll go to you, Madam Clerk, for some comments on your report.
So yes, thank you, Mayor Lowry. So through the chair, this report came forward because there is an appetite amongst staff and amongst council to return to the regular meeting format, which is committee of the whole and council, but also keeping in mind the limitations of gatherings and the requirements for physical distancing. So, and in consultation with municipal lawyers and other clerks, it's likely that we'll be continuing to have to do WebEx or limited in-person meetings, which will restrict public access to our council meetings. So in order to provide a more user-friendly approach that is both better for the public, council, and staff, and in consultation with our CAO, I put forward a recommendation to set up a live streaming solution using eScribe. eScribe is a leading provider for Ontario for municipalities. They have a vast experience, and they're also committed to be able to implement rather quickly to make sure that we could be up and running with this for the August 11th meeting, which will, if we're all able to get into council chambers, we can have council and staff and any delegations presenting in council chambers with it being streamed live to the public. So I'm sure there's lots of questions on this, and It is within our budget. The 2020 budget did include $25,000 for live streaming. This comes just within budget at $24,800 to implement, including camera installation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hartfield. Is there anything you wish to add, CEO Kelly?
Sure, thank you, Mayor Lowry. Just do have some experience with this software. It is something that I have worked with in the past. I do think that from a user perspective, if you actually look at other municipalities that have this implemented, and I think there's been several recent implementations in the local area here, you'll find that it includes things like closed captioning. It includes when you actually go back to watch a council meeting, you can click on the item in the agenda and go right to that portion of the video. You don't have to watch an hour in order to get to the 2 or 3 minutes that you're interested in. It's from the user perspective of the public and what they're given, it's a much more user-friendly aspect. One thing that I do appreciate that the clerk's audio is a little bit not as clear on her PC as others. But one of the things that comes up as well is when we're going to try and get the committee structure back on the table and back in process, we're going to have a number of staff that are going to be involved in that. We're going to be under the same constraints in basically, can we actually open up the gallery of the council chambers and have everybody in place? We need a software solution that is easily usable by staff, that multiple people can come in and get it up and running, and we can publish something to the web in a reasonable manner. And this solution is going to offer that. On the other side, this is actually a meeting management software as well. And it comes with the ability to streamline the process for staff in that there's less actual staff hours required to put together a council package. I mean, remember, we do at least 2 meetings a month for 11 months of the year. We do generally take July off. Between that and our committee meetings, there's a lot of staff time in preparation of meeting packages, reports, and getting the minutes together. This streamlines a lot of this and does put a much cleaner package out to the public. I mean, I think to put it in perspective, if you want a crisp package, this is a crisp package. This actually puts a different face to the organization in terms of what you're presenting to the public. We've done our best through COVID with YouTube uploads, with the audio component, and we've received feedback from the public that it has been a challenge. This is a step in the right direction, and a very good step in the right direction. One last thing, there is an annual subscription fee that goes with this. This is not a one-time thing. So just to keep that in mind for people as well. I appreciate it, Councillor Lowry. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your comments. I will go to council for any questions or comments about this report, starting with Deputy Mayor Manelli.
People might be able to edit real easy with it, that's all. And change the perspective of what you said. If they can go to a certain clip, and that's all, that's my only concern. Thank you.
The CEO or clerk like to respond? About concerns about modifying video and whatnot?
I think whenever you have videos that are streamed and recorded or audio that is streamed and recorded, it's always open for people to edit as they see fit. The one nice thing is that the municipality will have the master copy of the recording. It'll be in our retention schedule. So if anyone does try to edit clips or to make something that's false out of a audio clip, we will have the master recording on record, and it'll be retained and it'll be under the custody and control of the municipality. So it wouldn't be something that is that concerning to members of council.
Councillor, Deputy Mayor Manelli, did you have any further concerns?
No, that answered my concerns, and that's great. That's good stuff that we have the original recording, and we're going to keep the records and stuff. As long as we keep it, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Delegated, any comments or questions?
Just some comments. I've had a conversation with both CAO Kelly and Madam Clerk about this, and there's a lot of research went into it, a lot of information that they looked into as far as redundancy. Maybe Madam Clerk, you'd like to expand on that as far as if the media stream failed, we have a backup in your plans. If we do have more than 10 people and we're required to keep it at 10, as far as delegations or staff coming into the council chamber, can you elaborate on that a bit for everybody, please?
So thank you, Councillor Delegated. So eScribe, so with the solution that they're offering us, if the Wi-Fi, for example, goes out, the recording will still keep going, so it can then be uploaded later. I will also continue to record the audio of all of our meetings as a backup to ensure that if everything goes down, for example, I will still have at the minimum the recordings, the audio recordings of those meetings, which could also be uploaded to the website. And then in terms of the 10-person limit, so with a 7-member council and CAO Kelly and myself attending meetings, that's 9 people. However, with staff reporting on their reports, we'll ask that they hold in either the Rams room, which is the conference room attached to council chambers, or in their offices, and will be called into council chambers to present to ensure that we don't go over 10 individuals. And same goes with delegations. I will coordinate with all delegates that we have one person speaking at a time, and if they would request to bring more than one person, I'll make sure that we set up chairs that are appropriately spaced out in the atrium so that those individuals are still able to hear what is being said and questions that are being posed by council, but are able to appropriately social distance and not be considered part of the 10-person gathering.
Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson, any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think it's positive that we have an opportunity to enhance efficiencies with what we're saying and hearing. Just one question of the CAO. He did mention that the fact that there would be an annual fee. Does he have an idea what that may be, or is that depending on usage and whatever?
No, the annual fee is set, and I believe it's in the $20,000 range, but I think the clerk probably has the exact number, maybe somewhere handy.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you.
So this is the clerk speaking. The annual subscription fee is $22,800.
Thank you.
And Councillor Gerard, any comments or questions?
No comments, thank you.
Councillor Holmes? Councillor Holmes, any comments or questions?
I just have one. I do have one question. Will we be having to sign a contract with this company for X number of years, or is it on a yearly basis?
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. So the solution that eScribe has provided to us is on a 3-year term. And then we can choose to renew that, but we could also, it's a 3-year term, and it could either be renewed or we can cancel it after the 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Maiden, any comments or questions?
Just a request for clarification on page 136. It says that the quote received from eScribe totals $24,800 for a 3-year contract and annual subscription fees of $22,800. So I'm just wanting clarification. So for the first year, would that be the $24,800 for the 3 years plus $22,800 for the first year for a total of $47,600? Is that correct?
Chad Brown
has left the meeting. Sorry, Councillor Maiden, that was confusing, I agree. So the first year is $24,800, and the reason why it's an additional $2,000 is the addition there is for the camera installation and just setting up all the software. Going forward, so year 2 and 3 will be $22,800. So first year, what you'll see in the 2020 budget as an expenditure is only going to be $24,800. 2021 will be $22,000, and then 2022 will be also $22,000.
Okay, thank you very much.
So just to provide a comment myself, I generally don't support single sourcing, but I think the staff have done a very good job of explaining why that would be a preferable option given the situation we find ourselves. Our procurement policy does allow for single source of a project in a situation like this. And I think with the work that staff have done to reach out to companies in this field, I think they've certainly identified a good company in eScribe. And I noticed in the report that over 100 municipalities on Ontario have awarded contracts to eScribe for live streaming and online meeting management. And considering there's 444 municipalities in Ontario, and I don't know how many of those do have live streaming at this point, I think that that really does indicate that we're looking to set up an agreement with a company that certainly knows what they're doing with municipal meeting management. And under the circumstances, I think it's definitely the right decision. With that, I'm going to look for a mover and seconder for the recommendation in the clerk's report. The recommendation is that council directs staff to proceed with option 1 to set up live streaming solutions for the resumption of council and committee of the whole meetings in August, and that council approve single source live streaming and meeting management software solutions to eScribe for $24,800, and that council directs staff to bring forward an amendment to the procedural bylaw to permit e-participation of council meetings as outlined in option 3. So looking for a mover and seconder for this recommendation.
I'll move. Deputy Mayor Manelli. Move.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Holmes. All in favor of this recommendation, beginning with Councillor Delegated. Yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli.
Yes.
Very good. So we'll have our in-person council meetings and live streaming for August. This brings us to interim report number 6 on the financial implications of COVID-19 for the municipality. And do we have our treasurer still on the line with us? Ms. Whitmarsh?
I'm still here.
Hello.
Hello.
If you could walk us through this report, please.
Absolutely. So this report is supplemental to the ones that I've been providing to council since April. And identifies any financial implications due to COVID-19. And the date of the report is up to transactions to June 7th. So on page 138 of the report, we'll go right to the daycare. Table 1, page 142, is reporting a deficit to June 7th of $43,418. Writing this report, the province has announced that effective last Friday, June 12th, daycares could open, but in order to do so, must follow provincial guidelines. So you know the daycare is in the process of preparing for reopening as soon as possible. However, the requirements of the provincial guidelines are significant and will take time to implement. So the daycare manager is estimating about 3 weeks worth of work. And that is to allow for policy approval by the health unit, to establish cleaning protocols, and for PPE to arrive. And also the facility needs to be thoroughly cleaned, and staff need to be trained on the new guidelines, policies, and procedures. So I believe most centers in the area are in the same position. I don't believe any of them have opened as of yet. Table 2, page 143, shows the Recreation and Curling Department with a deficit of $46,674 to June 7th. It's still unknown at this time what reopening plans are for the arenas, but I think we can assume that there'll be reduced capacity or limited capacity when we do reopen. So that means a continued loss of revenue into the fall. The Almont Old Town Hall is seeing a decline in revenues compared to 2019. My apologies, when I prepared the report, I missed updating to June 7th. So it should read revenue of $18,719 as of June 7th, and compared to 2019, $26,636. So again, this revenue loss will continue as long as the facility remains closed. Table 3, page 144, shows the library with a deficit of $4,583 to June 7th. I think the temporary layoff of some staff have helped reduce the deficit in this department. Some staff still do remain on temporary leave, although the library is now providing curbside pickup of library materials, and that service is being well utilized. Table 4, page 145, the building department still has a surplus, a significant one at this point, of $112,243 to June 7th. And also water and sewer has a surplus of $485,223. And again, as I mentioned at the last meeting, because no capital projects are complete at this time, and also we only pay debt costs on the wastewater treatment plant twice a year, and so we have not paid yet as at this point. On page 139 of the report, I have some additional concerns that I did briefly touch on at the last meeting. The first being the loss of penalties on the final tax billing, which was a decision made at a previous council meeting. So I'm estimating that loss to be $45,500 or in that range, if it's similar to the results of 2019. There's also a loss of interest revenue due to a decline in rates, both for the operating bank account and our investments. So right now, the decline in interest that we receive monthly is about 50%. So from $22,000 per month combined bank and investments down to about $10,500 per month. And lastly, the assessment office is having difficulty assessing properties for supplemental taxation. And at this time, that loss of revenue is unknown. Hopefully, they'll be able to pick up in the fall, but right now they are having difficulty getting out to properties to actually assess them. As you know, municipalities cannot have deficits per the Municipal Act, so the possibility of an overall deficit is a concern moving forward and needs to be continuously monitored. So I will continue to keep council apprised of any financial implications resulting from COVID-19, and I will also provide options to address any deficit if required as we move forward into the fall. I'll also continue to monitor cash flows going forward. The municipality currently has cash on hand and investments of $16.12 million. With the final tax billings going out next week, we're working on them right now. So following that first installment due date in July, I'll be better able to forecast any cash flow problems, and will provide further updates to council at that time. So right now, I'm recommending that council accept this report as information.
Thank you very much, Madam Treasurer. I'll just pause if there's any questions from council. Please feel free to ask a question.
I have one question.
Go ahead, Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, thank you. Rhonda, with your contacts with treasurers and through AMO that appear to be looking towards the government for some financial relief, have you heard anything specifically relating to that or municipalities?
The only thing that I have heard so far, and it's not been confirmed at this point, is that there may be some funding coming towards the daycare, and that would be towards operating fixed costs and PPE, the purchase of PPE. So that's the only thing, but again, not confirmed, that I've heard at this point.
Thank you.
Was there questions from any other member of council on this interim report? Okay, hearing not, I'll look for a mover and seconder for the recommendation that council receive the interim report on financial implications of COVID-19 as information. Mover and seconder for this?
Councillor Maiden.
Thank you, Councillor Maiden.
Delegated second.
Thank you, Councillor Delegated. All then in favor, beginning with Councillor Delegated, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. Our next report is regarding the procedural bylaw review, and I will look to our clerk, Ms. Harfield, for comments on this report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as we all know, the current procedural bylaw was approved by Council in December of 2019. As part of that approval, staff was directed to bring forward a review of the procedural bylaw to see how it was working and just if we wanted to make any amendments following 6 months of it being in action. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've really only had 3 or 4 meetings where we've tested out the current procedural bylaw. So I felt that bringing forward a review at this time wouldn't necessarily provide the best data, I guess, to review what is working well and what isn't. So I'm recommending that we delay it for another 6 months so that we have an adequate amount of time to see what is working and what isn't working, and if we want to make any amendments to our procedural bylaw. And similar to that, Councillor Dalgety was appointed as Chair of Committee of the Whole commencing in January of 2020. As a result of COVID, Councillor Dalgety really only chaired meetings in January and February, so which cut his time as chairing meetings pretty short. So I'm also recommending that Councillor Dalgety be approved or extended as Committee of the Whole Chair until the end of January 2021.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. This is a pretty straightforward recommendation from staff. I'm just going to pause to see if there's any comment from any member of council or any question to staff before calling the vote. Okay, hearing no comments and questions, I'll look for a mover and seconder for the recommendation that council directs staff to bring forward a more fulsome review of the procedural bylaw in January 2021, and that council approve extending Councillor John Dalgety as Committee of the Whole Chair until January 31st, 2021. Is there a mover and seconder then for this recommendation? Councillor Holmes? Thank you. And a seconder?
Councillor Maiden.
Thank you, Councillor Maiden. All then in favor, starting with Councillor Dalgety, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden? Sorry, Councillor Maiden? And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. Brings us to our 10th report of the agenda. This is an amendment to the Delegated Authority Bylaw found on pages 148 to 153, and I will turn it to CAO Kelly for some comments on his report.
Thank you, Mayor Lowry. This basically comes out of some research that was done through the Finance and Policy Committee, and we did have some very deep discussion about how procurement happened within the municipality. They did a lot of benchmarking in terms of what other organizations did. They came back with not a large number of recommendations, but a number of very pointed recommendations in terms of things that we should work on. Part and parcel to this is my perception that I think with regards to procurement, there seemed to be a desire from council and others to see some more of the process happen around the council table as opposed to things being happened under delegated authority through the staff. Nothing wrong with the way things were happening, just that bits and pieces of the procurement process weren't visible outright to the public. And those are things like, what are the actual tender results? What, why was somebody chosen? Were they the lowest cost? What were some of the other bids? And all of those questions get answered as part of the report that comes back. And this basic change would see anything over $100,000 would be exempt from delegated authority, except under emergency circumstances. And those things would come to the council table, and council would make the decision to award anything over $100,000, whether that would be an RFP or if it would be a tender. There's some examples of work that have been awarded under delegated authority in the report. Some of them are fairly significant, into $1 million and $2 million for construction work. But just to put it in perspective, this is not any different than the way other municipalities do things. Once it's in the budget process and it is awarded, or it can be done under delegated authority for the award. I tripped across some awards in Renfrew County just yesterday. They were all done under delegated authority. And this is not that it's out of the norm, but it's not something that I perceive that council wishes to keep going with, and they would like to see more of this information for the public. So we would actually bring these forward instead of under delegated authority. They would be brought forward as a report to council. They would have the tender results in them. They would have past performance of a contractor. They would have a recommendation to award to a contractor, and those decisions would ultimately be council. So this would amend our procurement policy bylaw slightly, as well as the delegated authority to basically put a cap on the approval of the CAO. So while most, I think, staff and CEOs are not looking to have less authority, we're actually putting a report on the table to curtail the authority to limit it to $100,000 in these circumstances. So I'll leave it at that, Mayor Lowry. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Going to council for comments and questions, beginning with Councillor Delegated.
No comments, thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
No comments, thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
No comment, thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Comment.
Councillor Maiden.
I like this. The only thing is, when it goes to council, just to be aware, we may want to review it after a year to see how it is working. For council, it might be too many things or too few, who knows. We may want to change the amount. It also leaves council open for perhaps accusations of political interference in tenders. So that's kind of a risk. I don't think it's really much of a risk, but something that I thought about when I was reading this, although I generally like it. Thank you.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli.
No comment, thank you.
I do think your comment is a good one, Councillor Maiden. And perhaps when the recommendation comes forward, you may wish to put an amendment forward that this be reviewed at a certain date. None of the recommendations or none of the options in the report do include a review. So I just draw that to your attention. So we'll be looking for a mover and seconder for the recommendation that council adopt a bylaw to amend the delegated authority bylaw 13-18 to set an upper limit of $100,000 on the authority of the chief administrative officer to approve the award of tenders and quotes for goods and services, and that council adopt a bylaw to amend the procurement policy bylaw 18-14 to require a report to council. So looking for a mover and seconder for this recommendation.
Delegated, move it.
Thank you, Councillor Delegated. And thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Maiden. I think I had Councillor Holmes as a second. Councillor Maiden, did you wish to put forward either a separate, it can be a separate motion that this come back in a certain amount of time, or do you wish to include an amendment to this recommendation?
I would like to include an amendment basically to say the council review the process after 1 year to see do we want to continue it or change it.
And as the mover and seconder, are we happy with including that as a friendly amendment?
I'm fine with that. Councillor Dalgety.
Thank you, Councillor Delegated. Councillor Holmes?
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay. Madam Clerk, is that okay, adding that, that provision, reviewing the process in a year?
That is fine. I'm adding it in now.
Thank you very much. So then moving to the vote, all in favor of this recommendation with the friendly amendment, starting with Councillor Dalgety, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. And that brings us to support for the AMO Board of Directors nomination. I think, Councillor Delegated, I'll pass the virtual gavel over to you for this one, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Thank
So
you.
number 11, support for AMO's Board of Director nomination. The recommendation, the Mississippi Mills Council support the nomination of Mayor Krista Lowry for the Director to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, Board of Directors, Rural Caucus for the 2020-2022 term. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please?
Councillor Maiden, move.
Second.
Any discussion on the recommendation? Councillor, I don't know where we left off. Let's start with Councillor Ferguson.
I second it if you wanted. I didn't know. Yeah. I don't comment.
Councillor Gerard.
Comment.
Councillor Holmes.
Well, just hope it all pans out well for you, Mayor Lowry.
Mayor Lowry, did you want to add anything here?
Sure, I can. I can share with council that the Lanark County was supportive of this nomination. So I'm putting my nomination forward under their council. There is a policy at the county level to support. To support the expenses that are incurred for traveling and whatnot for this kind of work. AMO doesn't provide expenses or a per diem or anything like that. So it is appreciated that the county has that policy in place to support involvement in these kinds of organizations. I do think that the Ford government, we're just at the 2-year mark of them being in power, and there's been a lot of changes rolling out. And they've been significant. And I think certainly with the situation at hand with the pandemic, I think it's probably more important than ever to get involved. So I appreciated that the county was supportive of my nomination. I guess the only other thing I would mention is that I spoke with our Zone 8 representative. That's for the Rural Ontario Municipal Association. That's Eli L. Chantieri from the City of Ottawa, who I was quite pleased that he was encouraging that I submit a nomination as well. So it's nice to know that he's supportive of someone else being this area being representative on AMO. So I think I'll just leave it there, Councillor Dalgety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Maiden, any comments?
No, just good luck. Get us our broadband and preserve our agricultural lands. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Manelli, any comments?
Yes, just I wished her well at county, and I know she's going to do a good job at that level. She's young and dedicated and got the skill sets to do the job. So good luck. Really appreciate you stepping up to the plate like that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll vote on the recommendation, yes or no. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard. Councillor Gerard.
Yes.
Councillor Holmes.
Yes.
Mayor Lowry.
Yes.
Councillor Maiden.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Manelli.
Yes.
It's carried. Mayor Lowry, I'll hand this back to you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Delegated. So report number 12, support for rural broadband access. So I will, I'll turn this over to our clerk for comments.
Thank you, Mayor Lowry. So this is a follow-up. Council has circulated some correspondence that came from Minister Clark's office regarding rural broadband in Ontario and calling on the federal government for further financial investment and support. So in following up with quite a few other municipalities in Ontario, this is a recommendation which would be circulated to quite a few members of provincial and federal government, asking that there continue to look into funding projects that are shovel ready and can implement broadband to our rural communities in a timely fashion. Because which we've all seen as a result of COVID-19, many people are being encouraged to work from home, but the limitations of access to reliable broadband, internet and cell phone coverage is a limiting factor for certain people to set up businesses from home or to work from home. So getting some investment for the private sector to be shovel ready to implement solutions and to increase the broadband connectivity for our residents is important to this council. So this is a recommendation which, if council supports, would be sent to the various people at the bottom as indicated.
Thanks very much, Madam Clerk. I'll go to CEO Kelly if you have any additional comments on this item.
Sure, thank you, Mayor Lowry. I mean, as Councillor Maiden also echoed, we have definitely some issues within our municipality that we want them addressed. There's a number of providers of service, and they seem to need a little help. And I think as much as there is programs out there through the feds and the province to contribute money, it does seem to be that this frustration still seems to plague us, and we haven't really been able to advance this to the degree that I think a lot of residents are interested in. In discussions with other staff, other members, other municipal representatives in Ontario, in particular Eastern Ontario, this is an issue that plagues them all. I think if council does support going out with this resolution, when you do, you're going to have an echo across Eastern Ontario of support for this. And I think it's prudent about the shovel ready. We've heard a lot about shovel ready projects recently, and we often think about bridges, we think about water, and we think about paving. I think it's an appropriate time to put this out there to make sure that others who are setting the criteria for these projects actually have telecommunications in their radar as well, so that it doesn't get missed. Because I think once the intake processes start for those shovel-ready projects, and once the decision has already been made that these are the things that they want to fund, it's going to be too late for us to be advocating. And I think at this moment in time is the right time to be advocating for those criteria get locked down, and we see those programs being announced. If they're announced without it, well, you can't say you haven't tried. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor Lowry.
Thanks very much. I'll just pause if there's any comments from anyone on this recommended resolution.
I think it's a positive first start, again, but as we've had significant discussion over the last couple months in reference to, and we've seen the ER contract, the RFP, and all the other private firms that are trying to get into it, but timing seems to be the biggest issue. And of course, if we don't get it started at provincial level, we're not going to see much results of it. But irrespective of that, it appears that as quick as we want to see it, none of us are going to see it as a Christmas stocking stuffer, because it's going to be a while before all of this gets together. And I don't know where it's almost like pushing rope up a hill to get the right answers. So you could move forward on it, as much as we'd all like to have the right answer and move forward, as I'm sure every other municipality throughout the province is also looking. So I just hope that this does, again, stir another fire and we can get more serious about it.
Are there any other comments from council on this recommendation? I wonder if, in addition to this recommendation, if anyone is interested in determining what possibilities are available for the municipality to become involved in some of the solutions for broadband. We do have several small internet service providers who have been in communication with the municipality. And it poses an interesting question to know if there is a place that we can provide some support or some solutions in this really large problem. And I wonder if there is anyone interested in perhaps asking staff for a report to know what is possible for the municipality to get involved.
I would be very interested in that. And in fact, I did have a discussion with the treasurer this morning, and the Local Improvement Act requires, I think, a legal interpretation. Because certainly in our discussion, since it's not our service, which of course is unlike the septage, which was our service, I think the Local Improvement Act takes on a different connotation when it's actually funding, or could in all probability address private property with a third party. So I wonder, is there an opportunity to get a legal opinion specifically for a Local Improvement Act, which again may have the advantage of addressing those particular areas that are rural, that really not in some of these equations that we're talking about with the various suppliers?
Mayor Lowry, if I could.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. I think, this is an opportune time, Councillor Ferguson, if you feel that that there's something that staff could do to bring information back to you, a direction to staff to bring back a report, a fulsome report on the issue. I do recall that there was a report brought forward in January of 2018, I believe, maybe 2019, on the subject. We could probably look at some additional work on that. And as you note, if there has been a discussion with the treasurer and a legal opinion is required, us sourcing that particular legal opinion to advance the discussion, because I think we've all heard and had deliberations and debate over potential mechanisms that the municipality can use. And I think it would be good for us to maybe bring that discussion to a conclusion. What is actually in the realm of possibility, and a direction from council for staff to do that would be appropriate, I think. Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I certainly would be interested in that if it's going to move it forward at all with any type of speed. I certainly would put a motion forward that we direct staff to review opportunities specific to, I don't know how we want to word it, but support for rural broadband within our municipality, particularly rural, and I mean rural because it's the rural part of it that really seems to be suffering.
And just to clarify, Councillor Ferguson, I think the mechanism we're looking for is the financial tools that are at the disposal of the municipality. So I think the direction should be to in particular to focus on the financial authority that the municipality can bring to the situation.
Okay, so then would you be referring back to the Local Improvement Act that would address the potential funding for that?
Yes, Councillor Ferguson.
Okay, then I guess I would change the motion then to staff input specifically to opportunities that may be available under the Local Improvement Act to address potential broadband expansion within rural Mississippi Mills. Is that closer to what?
I think so, Councillor Ferguson. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a seconder to Councillor Ferguson's motion?
Holmes will second.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Is there any discussion on this this motion to direct staff to bring back information about the local improvement option to potentially help with funding? Just pause for a moment if there's questions or comments.
It's Councillor Dalgety, Mayor Lowry.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in helping out here where I can as well.
I appreciate that, Councillor Dalgety. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Okay, hearing not. Oh, sorry, did I cut someone off? Okay, so hearing not, I'll call the vote then on Councillor Ferguson's motion. Beginning with Councillor Dalgety, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Okay, so that passes. We also have the recommendation that is in your agenda package. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's it's a page long, but it is the resolution. I'll read the therefore statement. Therefore, be it resolved that the Municipality of Mississippi Mills calls on the provincial and federal governments to include rural broadband investment as part of the economic recovery shovel-ready projects for municipalities. And staff, council would be directing staff to circulate this to the Prime Minister, various federal ministers, the Premier of Ontario, and various provincial cabinet ministers, as well as the other municipalities within Ontario, AMO, and FCM. Is there a mover and seconder for this recommendation?
Councillor Maiden?
Thank you, Councillor Maiden.
Dalgety, second.
Thank you, Councillor Dalgety. All those in favor of this recommendation, beginning with Councillor Dalgety?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli? Deputy Mayor Manelli, do we have you?
Yes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 13, which is AMO delegation requests. And I will pass this over to our CAO, Ken Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor Lowry. So, as you know, AMO is going through a little bit of a different process this year. It is going to be a virtual process. And with that, there's also the AMO delegation process, which are the delegations with the province that are also going to be virtual. So I think it's going to be a fairly challenging year, but I'm also wondering if, because of the virtual nature of the meetings, whether attendance at the conference is going to be as it usually is, and whether there might be an opportunity to get a foot in the door for delegations that maybe we wouldn't have had in the past. That being said, the CEOs of Lanark County are getting together on Friday, June 19th, to discuss potential requests for delegations. And I think, we're opening this up. They do have to be submitted by June 26th for the August conference. And I think, some of the things that would be on the table would actually be the rural broadband and whether we could actually get a delegation on that. And I think this resolution going out is hand in hand with that, and it would be a good opportunity to get in front of the various ministers on this issue. Just trying to think about who would be the minister here, whether it be the Minister of Infrastructure, I believe Minister Rory Scott, or others that would chime on this, Minister Clark. But I think there's a number that would benefit from hearing from Mississippi Mills and Lanark County in general about this issue.
So comments from council on this suggestion and any other delegation request suggestions that you may have. I'll start with Councillor Ferguson. Sorry, Councillor Ferguson, we just have you muted. There we go.
Sorry, I agree with that. Broadband is probably one of the most important ones, I think, and probably will be important at the AMO as well. But I wonder, should we go alone on it, or should we go with the county? The fact that county has supported EARN, which doesn't necessarily fall within all of our priorities, so is this something we should do on our own?
And yes, Councillor Ferguson, I think you're right to think strategically on that. There's also the question of access to hydro poles, which I think through has been an issue that again has been around for a number of years. It does seem to be an impediment to a lot of providers of service being able to get into the more rural areas. I think there's a couple of ways that we can work at this, but yes, I do think we have to think strategically. And maybe what can happen on that front, Councillor Ferguson, is seeing that if Mississippi Mills Council wants to proceed on that, I could bring it up on Friday with the CEO's Council and see if there's support on that. But I think we should have our hit list of things that we want to see delegations on as well.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Gerard?
I guess I'm not sure exactly how this works, but I thought that the province was really supporting larger groups coming together. So at the municipality level, I believe our CAO will definitely be presenting for Mississippi Mills, but I think we should as well look at being inclusive with the municipality as a group.
Okay, good comment. Councillor Holmes?
Thank you. I'm not sure if it's something that should be discussed there or not, but the whole business around our hydro and, Almon's being provided by the Mississippi River Power Corporation and the rest of the municipality liking to get in on those rates. Is that something that could be discussed there with some of the ministers?
Definitely, Councillor Holmes, we could put that on the list and make a request in that regard as well. It is something that I think is a uniqueness to Mississippi Mills and the Almont area, given the assets that we have that others don't. But I'm sure we could put that forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Maiden?
No, I would just add to Councillor Holmes' query about hydroelectric power in particular, and municipalities being able to maximize that for local usage, not just for the town, but for example, farms and so forth.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Manelli, any comments or suggestions for delegation requests?
Yes, I'm going to ask the county to have a delegation about long-term care home, Lanark Lodge, because that's going to be our major output of money in the next 5 years, and seeing there was no outbreak, seeing if we could extend it or ease up on the restrictions, or we were way better off than most of them. So I'm hoping that's a major cost coming up for the county, and I think it should be a major discussion over it.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And Councillor Delegated, any comments or suggestions about delegation requests?
Nothing to add at this time, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So Madam Clerk, I don't know if do we need to have a formal resolution, or are we able to just action the CAO to discuss these with the CAOs of the Lanark County and go from there? Just looking for clarity on process here.
I think it's fine to action the CAO to do this, depending on his outcome of his calls with the county CAOs this Friday. I've made a note of the two topics, the broadband and the ORPC and Hydro Ontario billings and things like that. So we are aware of the topics of interest, and if there's no uptake from the county CAOs, then CAO Kelly and I can work together in putting in a delegation request by the deadline.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. With that then, if there's nothing further from yourself, Mr. Kelly?
No, thank you, Mayor Lowry.
Okay, so I'll move to item number 14, which is the MRPC dividend payment. So this morning, excuse me, we did a little photo op. Normally the general manager, Scott Newton, from MRPC and the MRPC board, president or chair would come to a meeting and make a presentation. So this is just to acknowledge that we received our 2019 dividend from MRPC in the amount of $225,000. This year, we also received our interest on the promissory note that we have with MRPC, which is almost $120,000. And there was a back year that MRPC had owed the municipality, which they have been able to provide a check on as well. So we have an additional 120 that has come in off the interest of the promissory note. So it's certainly good timing for us to have that, and I certainly wanted to acknowledge the good work that MRPC does, and we're certainly lucky as a municipality that we have that revenue stream coming in, as Howard Allan had mentioned earlier. The only other thing I would mention, just while we're speaking of MRPC, is that Water Power Day is June 20th, and although we won't be able to do any major tours of the facilities and whatnot, like maybe had been hoped for, there'll be some news items on social media and whatnot, so you can look for those. But if there are any questions about the MRPC minutes or about the dividend or the promissory note, I'd be happy to answer those questions. And if not, we'll put the recommendation on the floor. I'll just pause a moment if there's anyone with questions. Okay, hearing not, I'll look for a mover and seconder then for the recommendation that Council acknowledge receipt of MRPC's 2019 dividend payment of $225,000.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. Is there a seconder?
Councillor Dalgety, a second.
Thank you, Councillor Dalgety. All then in favor of this recommendation, beginning with Councillor Dalgety, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, with thanks.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you, and yes, thank you to MRPC for sure. And next is the bylaws. We have 3 bylaws. Council remuneration bylaw, the amendment to delegated authority, and the amendment to procurement policy. Would anyone want to pull any of these bylaws for separate discussion or separate vote?
Councillor Maiden, pull council remuneration, please.
Okay. Would anyone else want to pull either of the other 2? Okay, hearing not, I'm looking for a mover and seconder then for the second and third bylaw listed in your agenda. So the amendment to the delegated authority and amendment to procurement policy bylaws. Mover and seconder?
Holmes will move.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes.
Second. Dalgety, second.
Thank you, Councillor Dalgety. All in favor of passing these 2 bylaws? Beginning with Councillor Dalgety, yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Maiden?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
Thank you. And going back to the first bylaw, which is the council remuneration bylaw. Councillor Maiden, did you have comments or questions on this one?
Yeah, I had some comments. I'm not sure that given the current situation, a lot of people are out of work and their incomes are down, and we're already kind of pushing back, tax payments and interest and so forth, whether we should be taking, I know it's just a cost of living increase, but I don't feel comfortable taking it this particular year. In my particular case, like it's fine for me, I could do without it. That might not be the same for everyone else. I don't want to speak for you, but I wanted to put that out as to forego it this year. It's only the actual salary that was increased. Everything else is the same. I wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Gerard?
Mm-hmm.
I agree, actually. I had the exact same feelings as Councillor Maiden. I do not believe this is the year that we need to up our salaries, per se.
No cost of living. No cost.
Councillor Dalgety?
Yes, Councillor Dalgety?
I also agree with Councillor Maiden.
Any other comments?
I don't necessarily agree. I think if anything, I've worked harder this time than the last number of years, maybe, because there's a lot more going on. But it seems that the government have seen fit to provide increases to everyone, including the teachers and everyone else that seems to be standing at the plate. So I realize it's tough times, and I realize all of that, but I certainly think we're putting the effort into it.
So, Madam Clerk, I'm looking for some direction here with, can we modify a bylaw on, I guess on the fly?
So we wouldn't need to modify bylaw 20049, we just wouldn't pass it. It would mean that bylaw 1907 is still in effect. So come next year in 2021, should we wish to review that bylaw 1901, we would repeal it at that stage. We just would not be passing bylaw 20049.
Okay, and then last year's bylaw would still be in effect. There's no issue with, this is not a requirement to look at this yearly.
No.
Okay, all right.
It's a full policy to review it yearly.
Okay, so in that case, I think I probably want to look for someone who wants to put this on the floor, and if it is lost, then the bylaw from last year would remain, and otherwise this year's bylaw would come in effect. Does that make sense in terms of process, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor, you're correct.
Okay, thank you. So is there a mover and seconder to put this bylaw on the floor for a vote?
I'll move. Deputy Mayor Manelli.
Okay. And is there a seconder?
Councillor Gerard.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay.
Mayor Lowry, can you confirm what we're voting on? Are we voting for an increase or not?
Voting to support bylaw number 20-049. If it is defeated, then the bylaw from last year would remain in effect. And if this passes, then this year's remuneration would come into play.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, hearing not then, all then in favor, starting with Councillor Dalgety, yes or no?
No.
Councillor Ferguson? Councillor Gerard?
No.
Councillor Holmes?
No.
Councillor Maiden?
No.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli?
Yes.
So bylaw number 20-049 is lost, so the bylaw from last year will remain in effect. I'm looking for a mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw.
Councillor Dalgety.
And a seconder?
Councillor Maiden.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. All in favor, beginning with Councillor Dalgety. Councillor Ferguson,
Yes.
Councillor Gerard,
Yes.
Councillor Holmes,
Yes.
Councillor Maiden,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Manelli.
Yes.
And mover and seconder for adjournment. Mover and seconder.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. Thank you, Councillor Maiden. And all in favor of adjournment, beginning with Councillor Delegated.
Yes.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Yes.
Councillor Holmes.
Yes.
Councillor Maiden.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Manelli.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, folks. We are adjourned. This was a long meeting. I appreciate your focus and your patience. Have a great night.